this is an example of a security-driven technology that now becomes inline mission critical. If your SIEM is down, business doesn't stop. If your zero trust SASE infrastructure is down, the company stops.
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
Cybersecurity Collaborative and Google is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership with one of the contributors to my latest book, the #1 best-selling CISO Compass: Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers, as well as from other top CISOs and cybersecurity thought leaders. Listen to the previous CISO Stories episodes at securityweekly.com/CSP. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC or visit cyberleadersunite.com. I'm your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Mike Zachman, VP and CISO, and Colin Chisholm, Senior Manager, Security Architecture at Zebra Technologies.
Believe it or not, I got into cyber because of Sarbanes-Oxley. And I won't tell the long story, but I was invited to move into internal audit in support of the creation of IT general controls for Sarbanes-Oxley as a long-term IT person. What I found was that I really kind of liked the whole risk and control concept. Once I kind of got into that, it led me naturally to the cyberspace. And I've been there ever since.
Yeah. I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I started, I have a degree in audio post-production from Columbia College in Chicago. Bumped around recording studios for a couple of years, made no money. But computers are always a hobby, Did my first math coprocessor installation on a 286 when I was 12. And so I was a sysadmin and doing project work and other things for about 7 years. And I was just really getting bored. And a friend of mine had been going to DEF CON for years. And he's like, oh, there's this crazy convention in the middle of the desert. You go every year, they have crazy stuff. And so I started going to that. And that really triggered me. I was like, well, I was bored being a sysadmin, and security seemed interesting and exciting, and the people were way more interesting than sysadmins. So that's sort of how I got into it, and that was
your story's a lot more exciting than mine. Thanks, Colin.
Well, that's great. I mean, you two obviously have come from two different backgrounds. One from the risk side, one from writing code is a younger person. And I really appreciate the audio skills because I know what kind of work that is doing a podcast. Our production team here is just phenomenal, but they correct a lot of stuff. So for today, we're going to talk about something that I think is a key issue for a lot of people today, and that's zero trust. So help walk us through that. You guys have done a lot of work around the zero trust, and I love talking to people that have actually done work in this area, rather than just trying to, use the latest buzzword today. So help us understand, what is zero trust?
I'll give it a shot. So how we discuss zero trust at Zebra was really derived from some common definitions and descriptions, especially come out of NIST. So we refer to zero trust as sort of the overarching philosophy, of having multiple layers of security controls from the source to the destination, right? It doesn't matter if you're 10 feet away from the server or you're overseas. There's going to be controls and visibility and all of that. But we don't. Unfortunately, it is a catch-all phrase that can mean a lot. We tend to use the SASE acronym, software
Secure Access Service Edge.
Thank you very much. Secure SASE, Secure Access Software Edge, and that really becomes the construct of different technologies that comprise the outcome, which is a zero trust sort of infrastructure or philosophy. I would say ultimately, if someone asked me what zero trust is, I would say it's getting out of the castle and moat model of all of your sensitive corporate data is in one place and people go to it. Right. In the age of high bandwidth and mobile computing and cloud computing, that's not really, there is a place for it, but it is becoming less common. So those are sort of my overarching concepts and how we talk about it and sell it within the organization.
Yeah, I would add on to it that number one, I view it as a philosophy, right? It's not a technology, it's not a solution. It's a philosophy that I think aligns very well with least privilege. That's something that we've talked about in security for a long time, and zero trust is just kind of a cooler way, in my humble opinion, of saying least privilege. Mm-hmm. When you get into, okay, what do you do about it? Now you start getting into specifics. And as Colin mentioned, we kind of rely on, I think there was a Gartner definition of a subset of zero trust around SASE. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of our first new foray into zero trust, knowing that we've done a lot of zero trust type things in the past before it was called zero trust.
So using the SASE, what sort of things do you have to consider when you're implementing that?
Well, sure. So some of the common components that you would see, under this classification of SASE, be having a SD-WAN, software-defined wide area network, having a CASB, a cloud access security broker, firewalls, a service, a secure web gateway. These are all different components that when I talk to people in the industry about, well, how do I get to zero trust? I'm like, well, some of the components, centralized management, you may already have as an organization some of these pieces. They're just not all stitched together into one platform, or you may not have a cohesive policy either from a compliance perspective or a technical perspective that add up to this. So I would say, part of the value of this entire discussion with zero trust and SASE is, understanding what your use cases are as an organization, what you're trying to achieve. And then you can back in like, well, we already have a CASB perhaps, or we have SD-WAN, or we have things that would add up to comprising those outcomes and fulfilling those use cases.
And for me, kind of one of the more practical ways that I viewed what's different is, as we Zebra wanted to go to zero trust with SASE, I summarize it. I use a broad brush, by the way, a lot of times. And so sometimes the details aren't quite exact, but, we want to treat everyone with the same level of security controls, regardless of whether they're in the office or out of the office. That's kind of a simple way. That's kind of how I explain it to my CFO, right? It's the same whether you're at home or in the office. And at first he was like, oh, so like you're on VPN. And I was like, well, no, not really. Mm-hmm. Maybe you might want to kind of think of it like that. But as technicians, we know it's not the same being on VPN. It is truly, we don't care if you're in the office or you're coming in from the internet. That's that whole zero trust concept. We don't imply any sort of trust because you've plugged into our corporate network. And so therefore, you need a different technology stack to support that.
Yeah. And to the VPN, VPN's a great example. People talk about, well, isn't VPN, part of this? Like, not really. Sort of from a design and philosophical perspective, VPN is extending a network out to another location, right? You're taking the corporate network and you're saying, hey, person remote or at home, here's the corporate network for you. Whereas with zero trust, you have to try to reach your destination, and it goes through the zero trust platform as a security and network boundary to get to the resources. And it may seem very subtle, but I think ultimately the direction of traffic and the possibly for lateral movement is entirely different in that scenario.
I mean, so did you have to have to change your VPNs, your technologies on that end in implementing Zero Trust?
We're running both platforms in parallel at the moment. Our VPN platform, our legacy VPN platform, works fine. But no one really likes using it. You have to click and you have to log in and you have to wait and then blah 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 blah. It works fine. It's a nice, robust, and reliable but deprecated platform. So we're leaving it in place. We're giving people a chance to use it, and over time, we're starting to roll people into the Zero Trust replacement and giving them an option. You can either use the new one, which is quote unquote always on. And we try to replicate the security controls and the functionality between the two. And if you're having a problem, just bail back to the older one. So we're leaving them in place, and then there's going to be a point where the legacy VPN platform will be deprecated, and or the hardware that supports it will just go out of service.
And one of the things that I've learned along the journey is it's the same story that I've encountered in IT for 35 years, and that is it's never as simple. The devil's in the details. So VPN replacement. Part of our Zero Trust journey is to, as Colin said, ultimately remove the old VPN platform and use the new SASE version of it. The challenges become, the advantages are, one, currently our VPN platform does split tunneling. And so unbeknownst to the user, they may feel a false sense of security that all their traffic has this super secret security wrapper around it, and it doesn't. When you come to the always on side of things, we're encountering differences in terms of our authentication platforms. Mm-hmm. How often are you authenticating, and how do you find the balance between authenticating every time, meaning entering a username password for us today, versus some level of, you authenticate once and then you've got some time period where we allow you to be there. And then you've also got the edge cases where people care about the fact where they're coming from an IP perspective. And when you go to the Zero Trust side of the things, you kind of become this behind the curtain from an IP address. And so for some users in our engineering space, in our IT space, that can be problematic.
The article this podcast is based upon can be viewed in the best-selling cybersecurity leadership book, CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers. So when you say that you're always on, what does that look like, and what's the technology behind that?
So the platform we're using puts an agent on all of the workstations that the corporation manages, and that if you have both of those modules enabled, right, both the secure web gateway and the VPN type replacement, depending on how you ask to go to a destination, it'll route you through one or the other. The agent is on the system; it's locked. You can't just exit out of it. So we put controls around that. And so from the user's perspective, whether they go to a public website or they go to an internal resource, if everything is on and they're authenticated, they just go there, right? The user experience is pretty much invisible. As Mike mentioned, the only thing that comes up occasionally is having to re-authenticate to the VPN portion, right? It's always very interesting. You're giving people access to the same thing. You're making it easier, and people sometimes are not accustomed to, oh wait, I have to re-authenticate every X number of days, or do I do every 12 hours? So there's some user education. But that's how it works. And the agent, it encapsulates and captures all the ports and protocols coming out of that workstation. So, we don't get into a split tunnel situation. So every packet that leaves that workstation has to go through the Zero Trust network. People aren't aware of that. But it also gives us a tremendous amount of visibility. If we go into the back end, we can see everything. in addition to our EDR platform, which also provides a very high degree of fidelity on the data.
What are some of those challenges that when you get into the implementation of this, those things that you weren't expecting to see as you're going through that implementation?
I got some lessons learned, but Mike, if you want to go.
Well, so one of the real common ones was that we expected and still believe that it's an improved user experience to use the zero trust access to our internal network. And it's a security improvement because in the past we said, our internal, let's say our ERP, it says, oh, you're coming from the internal network. I know who you are. Here you are. Just you're good to go. And with VPN, you went through this kind of a clunky one-time experience to log on to the VPN, and then it was the same. Now it feels like you're in the office. Mm. So take this away and put it into the zero trust approach, and they don't have that VPN explicit experience where I'm logging in, but now they just click to go to the ERP, and now they're faced with a login window that they didn't have before. Mm-hmm. So that's a change, right? Why am I getting this login? Then you can tune the experience by saying, how often do you do that? Is it every time you go to it? Is it every 7 days? Mm-hmm. So those are tuning things and just change management where it's the old look, it's different, but better. And that isn't the same opinion of everyone. Some people will say, no, it's different, therefore it's bad. Yeah. And so working through that is like, I guess we shouldn't be surprised, right? Change management is always hard.
Yeah, I think from a technical level, one of the things we encountered was, one of the things we're able to enable with this platform that we did not have before was SSL inspection, wherein you get the agent installed on your system and installs a trusted certificate, and then the system is able to intercept, what we decide to intercept and decode. So de-encrypt. And so we get visibility, right? Well, what are people doing? Now we explicitly bypass things like health sites, government sites, personal finance, things like that, right? We tailor the inspection policy to our acceptable use policy, which is very important. But what we did also discovered, and this was a lesson learned from our testing process, we didn't test with our most, I don't want to say difficult, but our most technical engineers. So what we found is there was a lot of people in the organization, and this is not unique to us, that they were using a lot of applications and a lot of sites that did not use a system trusted certificate. So therefore, every time they tried to go to this site or that site or run that application, well, the system was like, oh, you're doing a man-in-the-middle attack, or I can't establish a connection. So we had to do a lot of cleanup, add a lot of exceptions on a per incident basis to say, all right, this site is fine. We'll let you go to it. We won't do SSL inspection there. And what was interesting is we went through this whole process during the deployment. Ultimately, when we talked to the vendor about our numbers for SSL inspection, they said, oh, that's pretty good. Turns out that the promise of SSL inspection is greater than the reality, depending on your audience. So a lesson learned from the entire thing is, you want to, if you're going to do something that affects all users, you should have a representative group of testers, including the ones that will be the most technical and possibly be the most difficult, given their use cases and what the work that they do is.
Which users would you start with?
Well, I believe in drinking our own champagne or eating our own dog food. I think the project team is test group number one. Project team should be using the platform as they test it. But I think software engineers, anyone who's coding, anyone who's using doing CI/CD work, reaching out to code repositories, stuff like that. Those are the people that we found to be the most have had the most issues with the sort of policies we applied to the general population. And I think, then you also need, regular, normal people, right? Regular people who, they just come into work and they work on spreadsheets all day, or they do something that's not necessarily technical. What we also found is that this is one of my big takeaways, is not everyone who works in technology is as technical as you might think. We talk about our respective levels of experience. I come to things, with enough experience. And I'm like, well, I know what this is. I know what that is. Well, then you find, developers and other folks, they come in, they like, my joke is, I can use my fingertips to put words into a keyboard and create software out of my mind, but I don't know what a certificate is. And so there's you need a wide palette of your audience to be effective in that testing, because if you don't find those issues in design and implementation and testing, they're going to crop up in production, and that can be quite difficult. And it's all, if you step back and you look at it, it's all about, you're taking what used to be multiple streams of people getting from point A to point B, and you're forcing them down one path. And not everyone has been on that path, or they may have things that are different about the way they work or the systems they access. And so it's all about trying to proactively test, your use cases and your technology against the full palette of the users. And then you're able to, effectively get it into production and have a good user experience. And that's the ultimately, the goal is to make this as transparent as possible for the users. And again, your results may vary: size of the organization, complexity, how much time you had to test and deploy and implement.
What would you say are some of your most beneficial use cases that you found for implementing Zero Trust?
So for me, there's a few. One was this much better visibility to what was going on to our network traffic. A lot of visibility that we simply didn't have before. The other was then the ability to, I don't know if democratize is the right word. We were able to establish a more consistent set of controls, regardless of your user location. So it really helps with the whole work from home phenomenon, that we felt much better about the security profile of what's happening, whether you're in Starbucks, whether you're on, an airport, public Wi-Fi. Those kind of use cases become a lot less worrisome in this model.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we were able to do really early on in the project was, in the last few years, the company has been in a growth mode, and we've had a lot of mergers and acquisitions in this case. We had an acquisition that, we could have gone through the standard process of shipping them gear and flying people out to the site and, do all the network related configuration to give those users access to our data. Well, we were able to turn around and use the VPN type module and get them connected securely to our network, and saved a tremendous amount of time and energy and money. It was a very early use case, but that was a real world use case that really proved itself out. And I think security leaders should really think about, where are you spending those resources, and can something like this really pay dividends in getting those acquisitions on board.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. I think I could talk for another hour about this topic, because it's something that everybody has been very engaged in. But what final advice would you give to emerging CISOs, new CISOs, current CISOs, experienced CISOs, as they're looking at going down the Zero Trust journey?
So for me, the biggest piece of advice is be careful. This is an example of a security-driven technology that now becomes inline mission critical. If your SIEM is down, business doesn't stop. If your Zero Trust SASE infrastructure is down, the company stops. And believe it or not, and I know, Todd, you probably won't believe this, but all cloud services are not 100% reliable. there are outages that happen with cloud-based services. And so suddenly now you are responsible, accountable for a technology that can bring the company down in an instant.
Yeah, I would follow up with that to also say that, as you need to understand what your use cases are, but more than that, you need to have a vision for what the organization is doing now and where it's going in the future. This is a transformative technology. My personal opinion is that it aligns very well with cloud as a well-established, cloud's not going anywhere. Cloud is a new model, and it's becoming a predominant model for services and technology. An organization that doesn't understand where they want to be in 5 or 10 years should probably not go into this, lightheartedly. They should understand, are you a cloud-first organization or are you not? There's a lot of organizations where the value of this is not going to be enormous. If you really do, if you work for, the Federal Reserve and you go into a building and you're on camera all day and everything's behind, locked doors and all of that, that's maybe not a great use case. But if you're a cloud first organization with people all over the world, maybe that is.
Great perspective. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Colin. This has been fantastic. Thank you very much.
I appreciate you having us.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity, Todd. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you constantly thinking about how to keep your enterprise as secure as possible? Get to know Chrome Enterprise, the browser that will secure your organization without the added expense and complexity of additional browsers. Its simplified management features will free up your team to focus on critical security tasks that can be overlooked because of time and attention it takes to manage other solutions. Don't settle for a browser that compromises your organization. Visit securityweekly.com/Chrome now to start protecting your organization like never before.